it was very important to me to note that over the last couple of decades, when we had some serious terrorism incidents in the country, after 9/11, for example, the bombings of the World Trade Center in September of 2001, Mr. Gulen was one of the most outspoken people that said this sort of violence cannot be tolerated. Of Islam who have little tolerance for interfaith dialogue. Doesn't have philanthropy as a high priority. I'm John Suthers. I'm the elected Attorney General of Colorado. Lived in Colorado all my life, and I've had the privilege of being a local prosecutor called a district attorney. I was also a federal prosecutor called the United States Attorney, and for the last 10 years, I've been the Attorney General of Colorado. I have a very favorable impression of the movement, and it's basically stems from the people that I've met that are within the movement. I see it as a movement designed to help Muslims prosper and succeed in the modern world, with a heavy emphasis on education, which is absolutely necessary to succeed in the modern world, and also an emphasis on interreligious dialogue. If you're going to succeed in the global world, you have to deal with people of other religions, and you need to understand and appreciate what we call in the United States religious pluralism. And that seems to be a heavy emphasis of the movement also. So in general, I have a very admiring notion about the movement. I see him as the head of the movement, and therefore I have a very favorable impression of Mr. Gulen. I hearken back to the time when I had the opportunity to meet Patriarch Bartholomew of the Greek Orthodox Church. And here's a guy, one of the leaders of Christendom, and he went out of his way to tell us that he felt that Mr. Gulen was a very strong force in interfaith dialogue in the world. Here's a guy, Mr. Gulen's met with the Pope, he's met with the Patriarch of the Greek Orthodox Church. He's clearly trying to promote interfaith dialogue. He's clearly trying to promote education for Muslims, and we're not just talking religious education, we're talking about education in the sciences and the math, and this is all a very positive thing in terms of us all getting along in this increasingly smaller world we live in. I think it's a movement that represents Islam very well. It shows a segment of Islam that understands what it takes to survive, succeed, and prosper in the modern world. And I think it was very important to me to note that over the last couple of decades, when we had some serious terrorism incidents in the country, after 9/11, for example, the bombings of the World Trade Center in September of 2001, Mr. Gulen was one of the most outspoken people that said this sort of violence cannot be tolerated. There were other leaders in Islam that were not so vocal. And so I think it's a pretty good indication that this is a movement that the rest of us who are not Muslim can look at as representative of a sincere desire to succeed in the modern world. There are segments of Islam who have little or no tolerance for interfaith dialogue. They see any non-Muslims as infidels and discourage any kind of interaction. There are segments of Islam that do not believe women should be educated, and when you have a group like the Hizmet movement and Fethullah Gulen advocating for a different sort of world, I think it's something that all of us should embrace. If Christians, Muslims, and Jews have to get along if we're in this, if this world's going to prosper collectively, and the movement understands that. Interfaith dialogue between Muslims and non-Muslims is absolutely essential for us to coexist and move forward in a peaceful world. This notion that we can have a couple of billion Christians and a couple of billion Muslims and not interact is ridiculous in this world we live in, and so we're going to have to interact, and we're going to have to do so in a way that we can coexist and prosper together. So I think it's an outstanding aspect of the movement that it recognizes the need for interfaith dialogue and promotes it. The other thing is this emphasis on education. And I note that it's not just education for men, it's education for men and women. And historically there are sects of Islam that have not been tolerant of the education of women. So in terms of prospering and succeeding in the modern world, the notion that women also have to be educated, I think, is a real tribute that Mr. Gulen understands that and his followers understand that. I had the opportunity to visit some schools in Turkey, and I know of schools in the United States, and I have a very favorable view of the role that they're playing in education. Yes, there is a tradition in the Muslim faith that is adhered to and all that sort of thing. The schools are not limited to Muslims. They have non-Muslims. So there's a heavy emphasis on interfaith dialogue even in the schools. But I think what's very important to point out is these are not simply schools for religious indoctrination. These are schools who are trying to elevate knowledge in literature, knowledge in the math and sciences, and bring these students to a place where they can succeed in the modern world, regardless of what their religious beliefs are. Charity has to be part of the mission of every religion. A religion that doesn't have charity, philanthropy as a high priority, you have to wonder about. And so I think it's outstanding that the movement has a heavy emphasis on charity. As you know, in religiously pluralistic societies like the United States, we have Catholic social services, Catholic charities, we have Lutheran social services, we have Mormon social services, all reach out to perform functions that are frankly performed better by the private sector than by the government. And I think it's very admirable that the Gulen movement seeks that for Muslims as well. The local members of the movement that I know seem incredibly sincere. These are folks living in the United States who understand religious pluralism and see how it works in the United States and see that everybody can still have very strong religious beliefs themselves, but tolerate the exercise of different religious beliefs by others. And so I think the members of the movement that I know in the United States are in some ways particularly suited to understand how all this can work together, how we can have an emphasis on interfaith dialogue, an emphasis on education, and be in the best interests of Muslims worldwide.
As I became more immersed in his readings, I recognized that he really is a person who is much more than somebody who's a Muslim. He's a person of the world. He believes that this global community can be much better and much more working with each other, no matter where we are in the Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, East or the West.
People know about Hoja Efendi because he doesn't preach a limited or parochial religion. He doesn't preach a parochial Islam. He preaches an Islam that is inclusive, that is loving, that embraces the others, that is open to the unknown. He's willing to learn.